Welcome to another episode of Tell Me About Your Damn Book. I'm your host, Stephen Lomer, and my guest this week is a chemist, a historian, and an author of historical fiction. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Guntis Goncarovs. Welcome.
Thanks.
Is that close enough on the last name?
That's excellent.
Okay. I will start with your bio, if
Okay.
that works for you.
Well, that'll work for me. Good
Okay.
luck.
You were born in Seneca Falls, New York, to Latvian immigrants.
That's correct.
And you spent your early years listening to your parents' and grandparents' stories of the old country.
Mm-hmm.
You continued a study of Latvia and family history for more than 20 years and returned to your homeland on several occasions to explore the land which so consumed your attention. Your first published novel was derived from a compilation of family stories and historical study. You followed your historical interest with an investigation into the Civil War submarine, the H.L. Hunley, which featured in your second novel, Convergence of Valor. The sinking of the USS Maine captured your interest for your third novel, Havana Secret. You and your wife Joan enjoy the wonders of New Hampshire with your dog Sasha. Gardening, ice hockey, a beat-up old Saturn, and 3 grown daughters keep you well occupied.
That is correct.
All right, so that all checks out?
Yes, it does.
Excellent. All right, there are so many places we could begin,
No kidding.
but I want to start someplace unexpected.
Okay.
Your ponytail.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen pictures of you when you were younger. You didn't have the ponytail then. You do have the ponytail now, although it's shorter than I've seen it.
That's correct.
What's the story behind the ponytail?
Okay, way back when.
Uh-huh.
When I actually had a little bit of curl or a little bit of wave to the hair, I was able to let it go. It was the 60s. Come on, I gotta have a fro. So eventually, obviously, I had to get a job and work in the whole works. So it started cutting it back a little bit. But as I got a little bit older and comfortable in my career, I figured, okay, well, I'll just keep on letting it go. Let the ponytail grow a bit. I've cut off 4 ponytails to this point, and sent them off to Pantene long lengths or Pantene lengths, whatever it is, so that somebody who has cancer and this is no shot at you, that has lost their hair as a result of chemo or anything on that line, that they could put wigs together. Lately, it's been more difficult to do so because many people don't like gray hair. So, fortunately, there are Pantene long lengths, or Pantene lengths, I guess is the name of it. Actually, will take gray hair and dye it up for someone that might need it.
Wow. You have a very specific look that you've cultivated for author fairs and so forth. A vest, I believe it's a cravat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the armbands. What's the story behind that?
When I do historical presentations, what I wanted to do was try to get into the mode. So it was more along the lines of, let's see what I can do about trying to transport myself, if you will, to the 1890s, 1900 time frame, and get into the mode of talking that way, or being able to present the books in that fashion. Mm-hmm. So I kind of figured it'd kind of neat, do a little bit of dolling up and everything, and get the vest on and the armbands and the whole works, and with the look, with the ponytail and the whole works, it actually kind of fit pretty well.
Yeah.
It was something that I had thought about, and my wife had just done a great job of putting this thing together. It was all handmade.
Oh wow! I didn't know that.
And it was just a phenomenal piece on her work.
Wow, nice, excellent. Okay, talk about your passion for history and where that comes from.
When I was growing up, and I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to this at the time, but afterwards I started dabbling into it a little more, was the family history piece. Mm-hmm. And being essentially a first-generation American, everybody was talking about what was going on during the Civil War here, and the Spanish-American War, and the Revolutionary War, and the whole works. And I was kind of wondering as to, well, what about me? What happened in my past? Uh-huh. My grandfather was a officer in the Tsarist cavalry.
Oh.
And my mother was giving us all sorts of information at the time, little snippets here and there about the old country. Mm-hmm. Cooking was great.
No doubt.
Oh yeah, and but it was interesting to understand how her family, how my mother's family got here, and how my dad's family got here, which were two completely different directions that they had come. And I started asking her a couple of times, saying, "Okay, well, how did you get from there to here?" And as I was digging more and more into the information, it was kind of interesting that, okay, we're kind of on both sides of the ocean, our family, if you will, right now. So what is it? What is it over in Latvia that really is part of the family history? So I tried to put it all together for my my daughters, saying that, okay, Joan, my wife, is daughters of the American Revolution. Okay, not a problem. You can trace that lineage all the way back to England. However, mine, everything was gone in the war, in World War II.
Right.
Just, decimated. So
Sure.
The only thing you had left were stories.
Ah.
So I started digging into it a little bit more, and started understanding that, hey, this is kind of interesting, the history piece of it. How Latvia got its independence, how Latvia lost its independence, how Latvia regained its independence, and the whole lineage piece of items. So what I did is I actually put together a 1,000-page book of the family history, from the World War I time frame all the way to by the time my parents got over here, and then kind of sliced it up a little bit more to the point where Tillman of Simonix came out, and it's actually a pretty decent story with respect to my grandfather. So when I provided that to the kids, they were kind of saying, well, what about some of the American side of history? And at the time, we moved down to Carolina to pick up a job down at a power plant down there. Good friend of mine that had befriended me, even though I'm a Yankee, said that, hey, you got to come down to Charleston this weekend. Okay, what's down in Charleston? The Hunley was being raised. And as they were pulling up the Hunley, he said, hey, look at this thing, a submarine. I said, dude, you got to be kidding me. A Civil War submarine. No. I understand ironclads, but a Civil War submarine? Wow, that's really kind of interesting. So I started digging into the history behind that, and it was like, wow, there's a mystery behind the Hunley as to why it sank, after it was successful in its mission, why it never came back, and all of the little stories that you end up getting down south from a number of different people as to what's going on with the ship.
Right.
So, with being a chemist, you could kind of say I put a lot of stuff together, trying to figure out from a forensic standpoint, if you will, all right, where does this metal come from? Where does that chemical come from? And trying to piece back the evidence. And as I was digging into that, it was like, wow, this is really kind of cool, really digging into the history of items. And I enjoyed being stuck in that time frame. Maybe it's just a thing. Some people like to regress.
Sure.
But and then that kind of led to the the USS Maine piece.
Wow.
And saying, hey, wait a second, okay, there's a slight mystery behind the USS Maine. Now, granted, Hyman Rickover actually took care of that mystery, if you will, by doing a little bit of investigation on it. But at the time, there was clearly a mystery. Was it a Spanish mine? Maybe. Or was it sabotage? Potentially. Because there was a lot of skullduggery going on during that time frame. So it evolved. It worked itself into, wow, this is really kind of cool. The stuff that you can dig up with respect to history is just fabulous and absolutely amazing. So I think it's become a passion trying to put together the evidence of what was actually going on during that time frame.
Neat.
And there are some really cool things that I found out when I was digging into the story behind Havana Secret. It was just really kind of neat.
Nice.
A nice little story.
Nice. Cool. Okay.
Hopefully, answer the question.
No, absolutely. Okay. That's where your passion for history came from. Yeah, absolutely. Your books are all historical fiction.
Correct.
How do you entice readers who might not be interested in historical fiction?
I approach it from the standpoint of, did you know? And kind of ask a little bit about, well, if you're interested in mysteries, then there's a little bit of mystery here. Is there a little bit of intrigue in your background or espionage in your background that you're interested in? Well, there's bits of that along the way. Because if you think about it, you're talking just at the turn of the century. It's the beginning of a number of empires, and let's be honest, we did have a little bit of empire building back in the early 1900s.
Yes, we did.
And in order to do that, you have to have a little bit of espionage, a little bit of skullduggery, a little bit of, I'm going to get you if you don't give me this information type of deal. So it was kind of that type of item, or those are the types of items that I actually start digging into what the reader's interest is.
Gotcha.
And there's a bit of flash and bang in there. There always is in history and military and spy works and the whole works, and maybe a little bit of romance here and there.
A little bit of romance?
Yeah, just a little bit.
No kidding.
Just a little bit.
Wow. All right.
Just a little bit.
Now we're getting somewhere.
Okay.
That's how you entice the readers, the romance. Who doesn't like romance?
Well, if you can't get them by the spy and you can't get them by the history, okay, here's a little bit of flash. Go for it.
Nice. Excellent. You published a book in 2005 and one in 2012 and then one in 2017. Why the long gaps between books?
I like to eat, and I have to work.
Sure. Okay. Yep. That makes perfect sense.
I spend a lot of time at work, as you've probably noticed by the pictures on Facebook of the lonely little Saturn sitting out there in the parking lot.
I have seen that. Yes.
Yeah, but I do spend a lot of time at work. It's a passion. Chemistry is a passion. Nuclear power is a passion for me. It's I was on the cusp of how it really started getting into the commercial industry of nuclear power, and it was cool. Learned a lot and really enjoyed being part of the plant. So, needless to say, that takes a little bit of time away from actually doing the writing.
Sure.
But I do find that when I can get the time to actually do a binge writing, if you will, to try to work through pieces and parts of it. I've got one that I'm working on now about the McKinley assassination.
Okay.
And it's been a while to try to work through the pieces and parts of that.
Sure.
And then the other part of it's when you're doing the research, going off on a rabbit hole because, wow, this is really kind of cool. I didn't realize that Roosevelt was doing this. I didn't realize that this was going on at the same time. So it's a focus piece as well as a I like to eat piece.
No, I understood that. Yeah, I like to eat too. So yeah. The one of the most recent blogs described a return to Seneca Falls and referenced the old track where you used to run, the football field that seemed to hold the boyhood dream of playing professional ball, and the fabulous band that you used to be part of. You were fun.
I was fun? I was busy.
Yeah, you were doing all kinds of great stuff.
Yes, I was.
Do you ever think about writing about those days? It's history, after all.
Yeah, it is history. I do. I do think about it at times.
Yeah.
And what I'm thinking is it's more along the lines of if I can put something together associated with that for the kids, for the kids and the grandkids and all of the other ones that are coming out afterwards. Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Probably thinking about doing something on that line.
Nice. I would like to read that.
Oh, okay.
It sounds fun.
Great. I've got one sold before I even wrote it.
I'll do the pre-order. Yes.
Excellent.
So as you know, we have a gimmick on this show that we are contractually obligated to live up to. So Guntis Goncarovs.
Tell me about your damn book.
Okay. Havana Secret,
Okay.
1897.
Okay.
The world is changing. The bottom line here is that that's the time frame where a lot of the empires are starting to build. Kaiser Wilhelm is starting to feel his oats over in Germany.
Yeah.
He's got a spy network that's already been put together, so that he can go and put his fingers all over the place to try to figure out, okay, well, what's going on in Haiti? Well, what's going on over here? And I think I want a little place in the sun for a little daca so that it's nice with all the palm trees and coconut juice and that type of thing.
Sounds all right.
Likewise, McKinley has just been elected in relatively landslide fashion, if you will. And his cabinet selection was really kind of interesting. Everyone were how do I put this diplomatically? Relatively incompetent.
Okay. Very true today.
With one exception, the Assistant Secretary of the Navy.
Uh-huh.
He was basically told, you will bring him into your cabinet. And needless to say, the person for that position was Teddy Roosevelt, who had worked his way up the ladder into politics in the New York piece of things. So you've got that incipient empire building in the United States. You've got the empire building in Germany. Sagasta is assassinated. Cavanos was assassinated. Sagasta took over for him for Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of unrest in Cuba at that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
So the scene is basically set for something happening in Cuba.
Okay.
Over the time frame. What ends up occurring is that with the assassination of Cavanos and Sagasta taking over in the Spanish realm, he started putting an iron hand down on Cuba, which actually started pushing the revolutionaries.
Oh.
At the time, what we wanted to do was kind of push ourselves out just a little bit, McKinley being somewhat of a pacifist.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to push out into the Caribbean, push out into the western part of the Pacific to try to get our influence going. And at the same time, you had individuals who were trying to get involved in the Cuba area. Well, Cuba is the Western Hemisphere, and Roosevelt, of all people, said, dude, this is our territory. We don't want European countries over here.
Mm-hmm.
So we started supporting the Cuban revolutionaries at the time. The one best way to actually support the revolutionaries is stick a little spy network out of the consulate and do a couple of interesting little things, like take one of the revolutionaries' daughters who was imprisoned and kind of do a little bit of cloak and dagger routine, ship her off to New York,
Mm-hmm.
and then say, we've got Evangelina Cisneros,
Uh-huh.
up in the United States.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a slap in the face to McKinley. It was a big coup for Fitzhugh Lee, who was the head of the spy network out of the consulate.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting piece on Fitzhugh Lee is that he didn't actually spill his guts until like 1911, 1912, as to what he was actually doing down in that area.
Oh.
And the consulate was housed with the New York press. So the Yellow Press was able to get a hold of all of this stuff, and they were pushing for war. And you've got Roosevelt pushing for war, everybody wanting a little piece of Cuba, and it was kind of interesting. You had a bunch of revolutionaries floating around saying, "Hey, we want an independent Cuba." Roosevelt actually had resigned his position so that he could become part of his cavalry.
Wow.
That he had formed
Uh-huh.
and brought down to Cuba to fight the story. So it was kind of interesting to take a look at actually what was going on during this time frame.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, all during this piece, you have two ships that were the advanced cruisers, if you will, the Texas and the Maine, that were essentially the new mini dreadnoughts, if you will, for the Great White Fleet, or the beginning of the Great White Fleet. Fitzhugh Lee and Captain Sigsbee knew each other pretty well. So Sigsbee being the captain of the Maine, and Fitzhugh Lee being the head of the spy network, they had a little bit of communication going on to make sure that, hey, if anything happens down here, that we got to get some of our American people out of here, I'm going to send you a couple of signals. Bring the Maine down. Well, he did that. Maine comes down, and there's only one spot for the Maine to actually fit, and that's, I believe it was number 4, where they berthed the Maine. And sure enough, right around the time frame for Mardi Gras, when the sailors were wanting to get back to New Orleans to have a little bit of fun.
Sure.
The Maine blows up, and there's a big question. Well, is it a Spanish mine? Was it sabotage? You had coal fires. Coal was the big fuel for these ships.
Sure.
And you had coal fires on several ships that had been investigated by, interestingly enough, the individual who had become the XO on the Maine. Wainwright, who actually spent time trying to figure out, why was I getting a hot signal on one of the bunkers? Because he had the different type of coal, the more volatile coal. I'll get into the chemistry end of things and drive everybody nuts at this point, but I'll back off. But to say the least, the bottom line on the coal was that it was more volatile, a good possibility that it was going to burn, especially if you had, humidity, high temperatures, not too much ventilation. Sound like Havana Harbor?
Yeah.
So that kind of pushed the limits of what was going on with respect to McKinley's cabinet, as well as Roosevelt just rattling the cage, saying, "Dude, we got to go there. we got to fix this thing up."
Right.
So, so what the book does is it kind of takes a look at it from the perspective of one of Fitzhugh Lee's unnamed accomplices, and kind of poking around the different areas and seeing what's going on with respect to Cuba, what's going on with respect to Germany, what's going on with respect to the American Empire, and I'll just use that word loosely.
Why not?
The American Empire at the time.
Sure.
And kind of poking around to try to see what's actually happening. The backstory of this unnamed accomplice, if you will, happens to be a little piece left over from Convergence of Valor. I left a hanger at the backside of Convergence of Valor.
Interesting.
Who ends up turning into the main character that I've got in the next 2 or 3 books that I've got planned.
Okay. A through line.
And an interesting piece on this is that the backstory for this individual is because most of the people that were associated with his father, maybe I'm giving away the story here, most of the people that are interested, that knew his father are gone.
Oh, okay.
With the exception of a couple here and there that I'm kind of smattering between a couple of these stories. One is Rudolf Mosher in this in Havana Secret, who ends up getting killed off by a German spy. And I've got one that I'm working on right now with someone who happened to be associated with the Hunley at the time that his father was alive.
Okay.
And their paths are crossing in this new story that I'm working on.
Nice. Excellent.
So that's kind of the backstory of Havana Secret.
Okay.
And we'll dabble on either end of it as well.
Yeah. Nice. We have a segment on the show called Questions from the Great Unwashed.
Here we go.
Slick Rick 333 asks, which historical figure intrigues you the most?
No question, Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt?
No question.
Okay. All right. He is intriguing.
Yes,
There's no question about that. Yep. Carl from Massachusetts asks, do you listen to music when you write, and if so, what's your jam?
This dude knows me.
Does he?
He might.
Do you know Carl from Massachusetts?
I might. I know a couple of Carls in a couple of spots. I guess it depends on the scenes. It depends on the moods that I'm working on.
Okay.
If I want to set a mood for the crash and bang, let's go, it's 2 Steps from Hell. If I'm working on maybe a little bit of writing project on the side that I've got, it may be a little bit of Yanni. Or it may be, I hope I don't kill myself with this one, a little bit of Lindsay Sterling, which is kind of enjoyable listening to some of the pieces that she's got going through. Classical is always a good one. Mozart, and then you've got the cognitive and memory enhancer binaural beats type of deal, which is when you've got a ton of things going on in the background, ton of things going on in your mind. Try to wade through all of that and put on some of that, and it has worked. It actually has worked a bit recently with being able to focus on getting a little bit further along on the writing projects.
Nice.
So it's I think you'd probably have to say it's goes anywhere from long hair to punk, depending on the mood and depending on what mood I'm trying to create.
Wow.
For the book.
Cool. Excellent. Okay. Mustafa from Minnesota, why not, asks, do you have any favorite Latvian dishes?
Pierogs. A lot of people are familiar with pierogies.
Yes.
Here.
Okay.
And pierogies are typically boiled pastries.
Mm-hmm.
In Latvia, what has happened, because there's a lot of a lot of hogs, a lot of cows.
Mm-hmm.
It's somewhat similar to Maine, possibly Midwest, Upper Midwest, where it's cold. The most of the baking is done with a heavy layer of butter, real thick butter and everything.
I like it.
And the pastry has a little bit of flavor from the Middle East.
Okay.
The pierogies that my mother used to make were just phenomenal. The kids went nuts over them when we went up to play hockey up in Toronto. We'd stop off at my mother's house in order to pick up a whole bag full of these pierogies. To go up there. They didn't play well afterwards, but boy, they were good. And stuffed with basically pastries mixed in with like cardamom, maybe some cinnamon, some ginger added to it, and stuffings of like cabbage and egg, maybe a little bit of beef, maybe a little bit of prunes for us old people.
Sure.
Not that I'm putting in the same category as me, but
I'm getting there.
And there are all of these small little pastries, handheld pastries that you put onto a sheet, put it into the oven, pull it out, and literally it's just a bag full of the things. So it's the Latvian version of the pierogi.
Wow.
If you will, but baked, and just about everything is baked.
Yeah.
Likewise, my grandmother on my dad's side was always putting pierogies together essentially or pierogs together essentially as a cake. So all of this dough, and then you had this big old mix on the inside with ground beef and sauerkraut and all sorts of nice little European things.
Wow.
In there. Plus the flavoring. The cardamom was one thing that I just really enjoyed.
Wow.
That little flavor that's there in the dough.
Yeah. Nice.
I actually used that in making pancakes when I was making pancakes for the kids when they were doing their hockey routines when they were growing up. So I'd mixed in a little bit of cardamom in there just to give that flavor to it.
Nice. And Emily from Ontario asks, do you know any Latvian curse words, and would you share your favorite? These people did their homework.
Yes, we did. Duraks is a good one.
What is it?
Duraks.
Duraks?
Basically calling somebody a dog. A certain end of a dog.
Nice. Okay.
But that's about as far as I'm going to go.
Okay, fair enough.
There are a few other ones. But this is a family show.
Yeah, we should probably stop there.
Yeah, we should.
Before we go too far down that hole.
But it's interesting how the insults are a little bit different on the other side of the pond, than they are over here.
Yeah.
Some of the things that Eastern Europeans find insulting is, you kidding me? That's an insult?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
So.
Cool. And this is the question that I use to wrap up all these interviews. It's 100 years in the future. We're all dead and gone, hopefully. A young person goes into a library, approaches the librarian, and asks about you. What does the librarian say about you?
The guy's still alive. He's down the street. He just won't go away.
I was not expecting that.
Let's see. So I guess what the librarian would probably say is that you're interested in history.
Mm-hmm.
His material is not as dry as the nonfiction history. It's got a little bit of flavor to it.
Gotcha.
And that little bit of flavor is coming from the characters that are involved.
Okay.
And he's got a habit of throwing in little things into there that you're probably going to have to dig into a lot of other biographies and history books in order to find.
Okay.
Because he's done his homework on what's going on. So that would be the librarian that likes me.
Okay. Sure. Right. Yes. No, I understand.
But hopefully that is the legacy that I shall leave. Is that I've done my homework.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy digging into the details, especially those that a lot of people may not know. Such as Kaiser Wilhelm's 3 plans to invade the United States.
Wow.
Cool, huh?
That's a good hook.
There you go.
On. Yeah, I like that.
And I do talk about that in Havana Secret.
Okay, well, there you go. Wraps it up in a tiny little bow, doesn't it?
Cool. Excellent.
All right, well, that's all the time we have for this episode of Tell Me About Your Damn Book. I would like to thank my guest, Guntis
Goncarovs. It's good. That's
what
fine.
he said.
Yeah.
The book is Havana Secret. It's available on Amazon.
That is correct.
Excellent. So pick it up. Thank you again for joining us, and cheers.